We'll call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members present with the exception of manager Hockey with prior notice. And next thing we'll do is set the agenda. Anybody like to change or add to the agenda today?
Board President, Board of Managers, staff had no changes this morning.
Okay, anybody else? If not, I'll need a motion.
Madam President, I'll move we accept the agenda.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The approval of December 10th workshop minutes?
Madam President, I move to approve the December 10th, 2018 workshop minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. December 12th regular meeting minutes?
Madam President, I move to approve the December 12th, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? And the December 20th special meeting minutes?
Madam Chair, move to approve the December 20th, 2018 special meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next thing is the consent agenda. No, you can wait a second. Go ahead. Aye.
We have two permits ready for your consideration with Caprock items. Staff do have a
That's all right.
minor.
Take your time.
Okay.
Take your time.
Yeah, there was a car accident, or maybe it was a flood. It was hard to tell.
Well, a flood we work with, car accidents we don't.
I offered assistance. Page 23 of your packet. The adjustment is to the block of text just below, or just above item 3. Samantha has it on the screen, I see.
Okay.
Yes, the sentence she's highlighted, so second line starts, that the project, let's delete, does not increase peak runoff rates, and we'll insert, reduces the peak rates to less than or equal to 80% of existing condition.
Okay.
It just provides a little bit of clarity to the future readers. That's the only item we have. We're welcome to entertain questions.
Any other questions? Not all. Have a motion?
Madam President, I move to Caprock permit 18-110 and 18-111.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Next thing we have is open mic. I'll wait till Sam's done. Okay, open mic. Anybody here in the audience would like to speak today? Please give your name and address for the record.
Lawrence Cedarstrom, 9330 107th Street in Grant. And what I've just recently been annexed with several other properties from Browns Creek into Rice Creek, okay? And it's a little confusing because last year I had a pond dug, so I'm not sure if I come to you guys now or I stay with Browns Creek, and that's one of the concerns I have. It was a little bit confusing. The second thing that I'm kind of concerned about is across the street from me, we had an incident about a little over a year ago where the man brought in over 300 hydrovac trucks. And I don't know if you're familiar with hydrovac trucks, but they make a slurry with dirt. Now, there has to be at least 5 yards of dirt in the slurry in each hydrovac truck. Okay, now not one load was hauled off the site. Now, this is on a 2-acre parcel of property. And if you look back at the tree line, you can see that at some places the landscape was raised 4 feet. In other places, it's approximately 2 feet, and it has changed the drainage of the area. So I don't think Browns Creek was aware of that. I tried to make the point, but I don't think they quite understood it. Again, I'm coming here as a private citizen with a concern. I'm not sure, I was in the council, I'm not sure if I still am or not, because the 2 people that were elected didn't bother to show up to get sworn in, so there's confusion. There's a little confusion on that situation too, but like I said, I was in the council, and And again, the drainage has been changed. I mean, if you take 300 trucks times 5 yards, that's 1,500 yards and over 2 acres. And I'm very familiar with the property because the lady that used to own it, she sold it because obviously she's in her 70s. I used to farm it for her. So I'm intimately aware of the lay of the land. I farmed it for the last 6-8 years doing hay for her so she could get her green acres. So that's why I know it as well as I do. But I am concerned about the change in drainage. And like I said, I don't know if I should be coming to you with talking about my pond or Browns Creek. I had paid them, but I don't know. Again, it's kind of confusing for me, so any help on that would be great.
Wait a minute, okay, we got two here.
Good morning, Councilmember Cedarstrom. Thanks for coming this morning. The intent is very clear. We've talked with Browns Creek. All permits that are underway or have taken place prior to today, and when Bowser approves it, which they haven't approved the final boundary change yet, will continue with that watershed. So you should continue to work with Browns Creek Watershed District on all permits and ongoing permit-related activities that happened before today, which sounds like both of those cases are in that category. I know that they've already are aware of that, and actually the administrator was here previously and is aware that, that this is a concern, so.
I do have one additional concern. I'm very environmentally aware. I'm near organic. I have a gutter on the sacrifice side of my barn, so I am concerned, on the environmental side of things. But I guess my concern was when I was working with them, I immediately planted the ground with hay. And I bring a cultipacker behind the grain drill, so you'll see all these little lines 3 inches parallel. And that person looking at it didn't recognize that it was seeded, so I always kind of worried about the competency of that basis, because parallel lines over a whole field 3 inches apart normally don't occur in nature unless they're placed there by someone. So that's the story, but I just keep working with Browns Creek then? Okay,
That's great, John.
thank you.
Madam President, yes, I've had a discussion with Commissioner Miron in Washington County, particularly about the situation you're talking about, both of them. And that was his understanding also, as he explained it to me, that you would continue to work with Browns Creek until, with those permits.
Well, I also have a permit from Washington County, so
Yeah,
that's on it. And
and Washington County.
They've been very, very helpful on that basis, just that Browns Creek didn't seem to be quite cognizant of what I had done, and I pointed it out, but, I guess.
I just wanted to point, make that to reinforce Administrator Belfour here, that's our understanding of how this is working over there, and so.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very
we
much
should
for.
continue on that line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for open mic today? Name and address, please.
Larry Lanou, I can't add to his confusion on whether we're a councilman or not. Like I said, they haven't taken their chair yet. They did run, and they are seated, or not seated yet. So once again, I'm here, and I'd like to thank the opportunity to speak. My name is Larry Lanou. I'm here representing myself. Because it's nice to be able to speak again without threat of arrest. Recently, at the December 18th Planning Commission for the Rink 2, which the application will be in front of this board, I was denied my right to speak. I did not stand down from the podium. The sheriff showed up. We got a police report. And so it's very relieving to see that you can come talk to a body, without that threat. So my purpose for coming here today is once again to ask if this commission would be willing to draft a letter supporting Minnesota legislation prohibiting schools being built within a quarter mile of a dump if toxins exceed residential levels. In other words, you can't build a home on it. Further, it would require that existing schools be required to notify their parents and staff if toxins exceed residential levels. Now, I've previously informed this body that Minnesota is the second highest number of schools with schools located near toxic dump sites. When Wildwood Elementary was built, it became the Dirty Dozen. And the majority of those schools in a toxic dump site are in the Rice Creek watershed. So I think your support in a letter, when I go back to the legislator saying that you would support a bill prohibiting schools being built, would offer you guys some coverage as far as liability, because the information you're being given is not accurate. Review of the articles by the White Bear Press environmental worksheet will show that Bay West was recommended that you have an environmental impact statement. City of Grant chose to go around it and said we have no need for an impact statement. Concerns listed said it would expose utility workers, site workers, and the public, since the trenches will trespass through contaminated soil. As you know, this body is aware that this rink tool is being proposed to be built on the actual dump site. So, in the application for this, it's my opinion that we're provided a lot of false documentation. The EAW says, are there any future plans for this site? And if you look at the documentation, Mr. Cedarstrom was chairman of the Planning Commission at the time. They do have future plans that move O.H. Anderson onto that site, and I will provide you a copy of the plans that was written by Landmark Environmental. It does say that when Mr. Rogaszewski wrote down in his comments in the White Bear Press, and I've got copies and articles for all of you, he fails to mention that there was no need for a impact statement when actually there is. That it is on a toxic dump site. The other, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of me right here. Just bear with me a second. I did print it out.
Excuse me, Larry, could you tell me when that was written, or what are your,
I'm referring to the environmental assessment worksheet written by Bay West.
okay, and what year, when?
And the White Bear Press states that Bay West recommended an impact statement, and the statement is being made by the city planner of Grant.
And when was that? I'm trying to get a
Probably
time
just in
frame.
April of this last year.
About 2019.
Yeah, and so the timeline's all in here in the provision I'm going to give you there. So it says deposition showing, and I've got a deposition taken from Mayor Jeff Huber. It says that private investors will be building the operation and then turning it over to the daily operations and everything to the school district. And yet it's quoted in Mr. Rogaszewski's deal that he said there is no cost to the school district or the city of Grant or Matamidi. Well, why would private investors be building? And he also said they don't intend to make money. Well, why would a private investor be putting his time and effort into a deal that he would not make money? One of the deals in a PowerPoint program that was presented on September 18th at the Matamidi City Council meeting said, I have approval from the Grant Planning Commission, the majority, the 4 members, and the majority of the council. Now, that's prior to a public hearing. Public hearing just took place as December 18th. That, to me, is a serial open meeting violation. Why are they be given approval to move forward? And I've got the documentation and the pages from the PowerPoint program that he put up at the Matamidi City Council meeting. So it shows that in that documentation, it says there are no other lands available. I'm going to provide this body with the other available land that was there. Both Mayor Huber, City of Grant, and Mayor Marshall, City of Matamidi, were provided with a proposal to give Rink 2 10 free, clean, viable acres right across the road. So besides that, they also have, if in order to avoid paying taxes, which is what they're trying to do, they could go to the O.H. Anderson site or the district center. There are other options in there. In fact, they can still keep driving as far as I'm concerned. Our taxpayers can still go to Matamidi or to Stillwater where they have their Zephyr logo up there. So in other words, they're doing this to avoid paying taxes. Any other one, like I says, in his presentation to the people, never really explains that the 50,000 cubic yards are toxic. They are run through there, and they don't explain how they're going to avoid running and violating the plumbing code. So, that being said, my real purpose, like I said, is that I'm glad you sat and listened. Why? Like I said, with the false documentation that's been provided to the permitting application, that you reconsider asking for an environmental impact statement as Bay West did, because you are the local governing unit. That's one of the things. But my real purpose here is to ask that this body would draft a letter fairly soon, because I'll be working with Representative John Purcell, head of the Environmental Committee and Legislation, to get this passed. And what I've been asked for in the past is to get letters from supporting government agencies that they would support this type of legislation. And if this body has the ability to write a supporting documentation, especially because you have the majority of the contaminated schools near toxic sites, if this bill was passed, you wouldn't have to worry about writing a permit for this toxic site. It would be prohibited by statute. So it would offer you a level of protection from that. So I ask this body to consider this seriously. If you can maybe talk either in workshop or later today and see if such a thing. It's not binding. It simply says that we would support that type of legislation, which gives the people the right to know that there's a toxic situation, because the best cure for cancer is prevention and early detection.
Well,
And
we
so,
will certainly look at it and have to talk to legal about it, of course, and see if there's something that's available for us to do or not. So,
I appreciate
But we
your
will.
concerns, and
Yeah, we will look
thank
at
you
it.
for your time.
thank you.
And I'll leave this with all the supporting documentation in
Okay.
case anybody
Give that to Teresa.
thinks that there wasn't supporting documentation. I'm not making stuff up. It's all out there. You don't have to. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Anybody else for open forum? Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Board. I am Bob Zick. I have property, business, and financial interest in the city of Grant. Everything I'm going to share with you this morning is based on my research and my opinion of the facts. The Rice Creek Watershed Board, I'm here to ask you to fulfill your responsibility and require an environmental impact statement from the limited liability corporation doing business as Rink 2. And they have worked out a scheme with the Matamidi School District to build a hockey arena on the former Bel Air sanitation site. Now, we all know that a limited liability corporation, nobody is personally responsible for anything. So this scheme was devised by the LLC, Rink 2, and the Matamidi School District to go around the voters in requiring a bond referendum to build an arena, and mainly the concern that this board should have for going around the requirement of an environmental impact statement. And so I'm asking this board to do your due diligence and require that this statement, like Mr. Lanou said, that Bay West Environmental recommended that that be done. And of course, the school district, in my assessment, went shopping for a different environmental firm, and that would render an opinion that would make the things possible that the district desired. And so that was a way. I guess the question I would ask this board would because Rink 2 doesn't own the property. The property is owned by a school district. Would Rink 2 I thought I shut this thing off. Oh, I apologize, board.
That's fine,
I was hoping it was somebody else's.
especially when you're standing there.
But would this board say if McDonald's came in here, restaurant, and asked for a permit and didn't own the property, would you issue a permit? So this Rink 2 doesn't own the property. The school district owns the property. And the politics of this is there's a quid pro quo going on here. From your own documents, the city of Grant and Matamidi turned their responsibility of permitting for the water runoff and quality back over to this board. And so it says here, the local government unit for the wetlands within the watershed, that would be you. Ramsey County Water District, Rice Creek Watershed District must comply with the MS4 program because of the district is identified under the auspices of the permitting requirements. Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, responsible for establishing groundwater quality standards based on health risk limits set by the Minnesota Department of Health. Again, all from your own documentation. So to the extent that the politics here for getting this ice arena built, going around environmental requirements and taxpayers, how was this facilitated? I think Mr. Lanou mentioned the statement, the sworn testimony of the mayor of Grant, who said that the intent is to put this up, turn it back to the school district after it's done. The taxpayers are now on the hook, and they've been able to go around so many things by coming up with this scheme. The quid pro quo in here is I was at a school board meeting where the school district facilitated a $100,000 scholarship to the mayor's son.
Okay, we have to leave the politics out of it, and all I'm asking now is what is your final request from us?
We need to understand a $100,000 investment for a $12 million hockey arena, that's a pretty good investment. And so what I did for many years was cover local government.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you here and just ask you what is your request of this board?
Well,
We can't help you with politics.
What I'm asking here is that this needs to be stopped, that this board fulfill their requirement to see that the health and safety is protected, that the water shed is protected, the water runoff and environmental requirements are protected, and that a environmental impact statement is required, and no permitting is given until that is done.
Okay,
Thank you, board.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We will go to Kyle, I believe is next.
Madam President, members of the board, here again today to have you consider an extension of an urban stormwater remediation cost share agreement with the city of Mounds View. Some of the history on this, it was a small project aimed at extending a piece of storm sewer through private property to connect the city's storm sewer drainage system near Lambert Avenue. The project was ultimately built by the city back, I believe, in 2017. Maybe an unfortunate decision by city staff to go ahead with the project prior to obtaining the easement from the landowner who they were working with to construct the project. They have since run into a snag with that landowner, and they are currently in negotiations about easement versus development of the property. The cost share agreement was expired on December 31st. On that day, the city submitted a request asking for an extension of the agreement to allow for additional negotiation time. Staff perspective, I see no reason not to honor that or that request to give them another year to work with Mr. Fields. And so that's what we're asking today is an extension of that agreement.
Okay, go ahead, questions?
Yeah, was the city, did they approach that landowner ahead of time? And he said no, and then they went ahead, or how'd that happen?
I'll go back to recollections here on this. Again, it was a couple years ago. And staff has since changed over at Mounds View, so the staff person who was working on it is no longer there. My understanding is certainly they were working with the landowner throughout. I mean, that's how this whole process came up. They were, at least had verbal permission. I know city council ordered, directed the project to be constructed. The actual recording of the easement did not occur prior to construction, is my understanding. They had one drafted, but it was not recorded, and the landowner has since refused to record it. So, again, it's a delicate situation, is my understanding. My intent is we've already paid Mounds View half of the grant. The alternative to extension would be requesting that those funds be returned to the Watershed District. There's no need for us to be in the middle of it until such a time where it's necessary.
Right.
And so I'd prefer to just let the city handle this over the next year. And hopefully they can find some resolution.
So, Madam President, as I understand it, the project itself has been completed.
Correct.
So we got what we paid for. We just haven't got the
They-
maintenance or whatever.
Yeah,
requirements
the
taken
city
care of.
doesn't
Okay.
have the authority to go in and maintain the project that they built, and that's the concern.
So, Madam President, I'll move that we amend the 2016 urban stormwater remedial program cost share agreement between Rice Creek Watershed District and the city of Mounds View by changing its expiration date to December 31st, 2019.
Second?
Motion and second?
And I just want to emphasize what Kyle has already pointed out, but it's in the document here, that it may result in both the termination of the cost share agreement and the need to return the cost share funding already provided. I think that's what we're talking about here. So we'll give them time and we'll see
if
what
they can-
happens
See if they can work it out.
about this time next year, hopefully sooner.
Hopefully, sir. And the city is aware of, our stance with, needing to have the funds returned
Yeah,
if they can't fulfill their end of the bargain, so.
I think you're quite clear in that, Kyle. I just wanted to put that on the record, that what you were pointing out there. So.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Citizen advisory?
Board President, Board of Managers, starting on page 44 of your packet, you'll find our annual memo related to appointments related to the Citizen Advisory Committee for Rice Creek Watershed District. The managers are required to maintain an advisory committee to advise you. As you know, 2019 will be a very busy year for that advisory committee, including the helping, assisting you, and providing you recommendations related to the watershed management plan. The current membership, as you can see there in the memo, includes 10 individuals. All of them have requested to be reappointed to you. There are 2 vacancies. Conversations and recruitment are ongoing for both of those actively as we speak. Staff's recommendation, based on their willingness of the 10 members to continue to serve on the CAC, is that the board reappoint the above 10 members at this meeting.
Thank you.
Madam President, I'll move that we appoint the 10 members proposed for the membership to the Citizens Advisory Committee for 2019. And I'd also point out there's a vacancy for Washington County if anyone was interested,
Okay,
And Ramsey County.
and Ramsey County too, yeah.
okay. We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
Motion made and second. Further discussion? The only thing I'd like to say is we're very fortunate to have such a professional group working with us. So, with that, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Lauren.
Good morning, President Preiner, Board of Managers.
Madam President, can I interject you? It looks to me like Samantha may be in the process of standing up to leave. You should put your coat on. I didn't want you to leave without us talking to you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
For your consideration today is the City of Spring Lake Park's local water plan. In your packets, you'll find, starting on page 48, the draft resolution, the city's executive summary on pages 50 to 51, the city's identified water resource issues on page 52, and the city's CIP tables on pages 53 and 54. The City of Spring Lake Park submitted their local water plan to all agencies for formal agency review on September 11th of last year. The district reviewed for consistency with the district's watershed management plan and Minnesota Rules 8410, Minnesota Statute 103B 235, and the district and Met Council both submitted comments on the plan. The city's final draft submitted to the district on December 19th of last year sufficiently addresses all comments and is now consistent with the district and state requirements. The city has identified a few water resource issues within the district's boundary. These are on page 52 in your packets. And the city has indicated that it has limited financial ability to implement water quality BMPs, which they list here on number 1 on the table. There are also low water levels and water quality issues in Spring Lake, which they note here on number 5 in their table. And the city also drains directly to Lower Rice Creek, which is impaired for E. coli, and the city is involved in the Upper Mississippi River bacteria TMDL, and they note that on number 3 in their table. To address these issues, the city is interested in working with the district on water quality BMPs. They would like to partner with us this year on a Garfield area pond project in order to help raise the water levels of Spring Lake and improve the water quality. This is the first project in their table on page 54. And the city has also recently submitted an urban stormwater remediation cost share application as well for this project. The city has also identified a few projects from our Southwest Urban Lakes study from 2009. These are numbers 2 through 6 on their table on page 54. I'm only highlighting 2 of those today, which are on this slide here. The second project they list is adding a rain garden next to, or in the open space next to the Pleasant View Deaf Assembly Church. And the third project they list here is adding a rain garden to Lakeside Park, which could be a possible public demonstration project. To address the urban stormwater, or to help address the urban stormwater, the Upper Mississippi River bacteria TMDL goals, the city would or will continue to enforce its animal waste ordinance, its existing animal waste ordinance, and it would like to work with the district to identify additional strategies to help reduce bacteria loading to Rice Creek. To conclude, staff find that the City of Spring Lake Park's plan is consistent with district and state requirements. Staff recommends approval of the City of Spring Lake Park's plan as submitted to the district on December 19th of last year. Are there any questions for me?
Questions for Lauren? Anybody? If not, we have a resolution.
Madam President, I move that we approve Resolution 2019-01 and its adoption. And 2019-01 provides in part that Rice Creek Board of Managers approves the City of Spring Lake Park's local water management plan as submitted on December 19, 2018.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Madam President, I'm a little confused here. Did you say 01 resolution?
It's 2019-01.
It
Page
is.
48.
Okay, I'm in the wrong resolution. I'm on 2 already. Sorry there. Thank you.
Okay, and roll call will be Waller,
Yes.
Hockey absent, Bradley,
Yes.
Wakeman,
Yes.
Kreiner, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Madam
Thank you.
President, can I, apparently they want us to help fund one of these projects this year. Can you just take 30 seconds to kind of get an understanding of what their expectations are and what reality is?
Sure. Board President, Manager Bradley, the Garfield area pond has been submitted to us by the deadline of December 31st of 2018 under both the Bowser watershed-based funding / urban stormwater program application. You have $730,000 approximate dollars, as you are aware, in the 3 counties. And this was one of the applications we did receive. We're currently just starting to review those. As you know, we'll be talking to the Citizen Advisory Committee about that later in January. Staff, Houston and CAC will then provide you recommendations, and that'll be in February.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move ahead. Research electronic meeting, is that the next one here?
That'll be Catherine next.
Catherine's up.
Good morning, Madam President, managers. Please refer to the memo that Teresa passed out before the meeting on consideration of remote meeting participation investigation. At the January 7th, 2019 workshop, the board expressed interest in proceeding with an investigation of available options and costs for remote participation in by board members in some but not all meetings subject to open meeting law. The investigation will include the hiring of an audiovisual consultant to determine available options and costs for remote participation in meetings in the Rice Creek Watershed District Large Conference Room, which was identified as the most preferred location, and if allowed by the City of Shoreview, the Shoreview City Council chambers. Staff will also research what other cities and local governments are doing remote meeting participation and seek their feedback. Staff recommends that the board authorize staff to, 1, hire an audiovisual consultant to determine available options and costs for remote participation in meetings in the Rice Creek Watershed District Large Conference Room and, if allowed by the City of Shoreview, the Shoreview City Council chambers. And 2, research what other cities and local governments are doing remote meeting participation and seek their feedback.
Okay. I do have a question. I assume then you're gonna put out some kind of proposals to a couple different people to give us estimates?
So we have spoken with our IT company, Computer Revolution, and they did give a single reference for a audiovisual consultant that happens to be in conversation currently with the City of Shoreview for improvements to this very room,
Okay.
just from our, high-level conversations thus far. So we thought that it would likely be moving forward with that particular consultant because of the current arrangement, but we would be open to, opening
Well,
up
I'm
to
just
other.
thinking because there's a big variation in costs in this, when they're giving you those estimates, and they can spend as much time as they want or not. So I think, maybe we should look at 2, at least look at a comparison.
Sure, yeah, that would
If you can find
be,
somebody else that you can compare.
sure,
to.
at least 2 different
I
consultants
would
to get
think, just to
cost
get,
estimates
if
from.
they're way different, or if they're
Sure.
the same, then go with the easiest route, I think.
Definitely.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we need a motion.
Madam President, I would move that we authorize staff to hire an audiovisual consultant to determine available options and costs for remote participation in meetings in the Rice Creek Large Conference Room, and if allowed by the City of Shoreview, and that they reach out to other cities and local governments in our watershed district to determine availability of those locations for possible use for remote meetings.
I'll second that.
Slightly
There's a-
different.
But there's a correction here, so
Yeah,
it's,
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. One suggestion would be to add a not to exceed amount in here so that I can work, staff can work with President Priner. And so we, if you wish, I understand perhaps your intent is to not have to come back to the board to execute that. I could work with President Priner and then you could just provide a not to exceed amount and she could authorize that once we get our 2 quotes.
And do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, do we have
Yeah,
any
this is
ideas?
just for
Outside
their,
my wheelhouse here
this
on
is
AV
just for their
consultants, but,
expertise, so it shouldn't be.
I have no idea what do we put for a
Well,
limit.
I don't know.
Well, and the other thing is
Probably-
usually they'll come with a proposal. You shouldn't have to pay
Yeah.
them anything to tell you what they're gonna charge.
No, yeah, I would say under, I don't know, couple thousand, 5,000, I don't know, cause this is AV folks and I don't work in
Yeah.
that world, but I would say 5,000, it shouldn't be more than 5,000, how about that?
But are we
So,
hiring
Matt-
somebody to go out and get people, or are we asking for proposals from people?
We're asking them to do research and give us proposals, options on what
For
would,
them to go out and research it?
what would meet the, intent of the performance standards in the statute and what would satisfy that in a simple and non-complicated way as possible.
so, Madam President, I thought, you suggested that we'd have a minimum of 2 of these proposals come back. And so therefore, I think we're kind of in charge of the not to exceed amount by looking at those proposals that they bring back. But, or am I
But see, I think we're talking about a person in between here.
Yeah, I think we're one step in advance of not to exceed. We're looking to find consultants, and then we're gonna get a proposal.
So you contact
I
2 or
think
3
that's what
consultants
Phil was
and then,
talking about,
and then they come in with a proposal.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, and they're bidding the job,
Yeah.
and so I don't think we have to pay them to
To bid their
provide that
job.
bid.
Yeah.
That
I
was
think,
my point.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were saying, maybe. and-
Manager Waller, managers, just again, from my high-level conversations that I've had with this one particular consultant, there may be cost associated with obtaining an estimate, depending on how involved, in order for them to give an estimate, it would definitely involve a site visit, both to our.
Yeah, but if
both
you
to-
want the job, wouldn't you go to the job and look?
All right, so-
Maybe Chris
So
had
I
a
will,
comment.
I will modify my motion to say not to exceed $5,000.
Chris had a comment. Let's see what-
Yeah, Madam President, I would guess that in this case, they may be taking on a little different role than being a contractor. They're actually becoming more of a consultant in this case
Exactly.
because they're providing the district some sort of guidance as to what it needs to know in order to actually make a decision on a further contract that might occur.
But then
So
if we're hiring a consultant, then we need to say we want 5 proposals or something, or 2 or 3.
Yeah, but, Madam President, so, this is the second part of this, document. And it said what the staff was going to do. And they were going to check with the other cities and look around. So I would think that that's the, what'd you say, high-level individuals that you talk to, be at these different cities, to find out what their experience is and what consultants provide the services at their cities. And then that would give you the staff would act as the middleman, and the others ought to just be bidding the job for putting it in.
Well, that's kind of.
That's kind of,
That's kind of what I was
what I
thinking.
understood we were talking about, but maybe I'm,
In,
and that's what this document, the way I read it, says.
in my opinion, I'd give Phil, our administrator, the money and let him figure all this out. That's the whole idea. I don't think we have to solve the problem here, do we? If we give him,
Well, if we're
give our
gonna,
administrator the room he needs and let him solve it.
but this is a different motion than that. Chris had another comment.
Madam President, I just wanted to introduce the idea that it might be difficult even getting more than one quote from somebody to help you with this work, especially understanding some of the research that I've already done already. This is a very specialized type of work, and so you might consider providing some latitude in case you don't get more than one person
Motion-
willing to
yeah,
assist.
Motion doesn't require more than one, we just made a recommendation to staff to look to see if you can find more than one.
Well, at the point now, you've modified your motion.
But it was my motion, I threw on $5,000
Okay,
on it, so.
and as a second, I'll accept your modification because this is getting to be way too much chit chat.
But the only thing I can say is Capital Region just built a whole new facility. I would go right straight to them.
The high-level talks that I've had with the consultant so thus far is the same
Is the one that was doing
consultant
that?
that
Okay.
was doing
Well,
that
then they
one,
must be
yeah.
the most recent updated. Any other comments, questions? Everybody understand the motion? Not to exceed 5,000? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that takes care of our meeting participation. Phil's next, 55.
Thank you. Board President, Board of Managers, starting on page 56 of your packet, you'll see Plan Addendum number 2, consideration, which is also Resolution 1902. The proposed repair of branches 1 and 2 of JD2 is the first implementation of a trunk maintenance system for a full repair within the Rice Creek Watershed District, utilizing the trunk maintenance program as identified in your current approved watershed management plan. The staff has reviewed your water management plan and identified a slight bit of lack of clarity in your current watershed management plan. That plan establishes policies and programs for maintenance and repair of the designated trunk drainage system for minor drainage system maintenance be paid for through ad valorem tax generated by the district. The current plan identifies a program for drainage system inspection, maintenance, and repair generally funded for $250,000 to $500,000 per year, up to $5 million over that 10-year lifespan. The plan also describes the maintenance funds, does not specify whether the fund is intended to satisfy the trunk drainage system. Therefore, based on Minnesota Rules 8410, staff's recommending you pursue a process that's identified in that rule to adopt a clarification of this existing plans and policies to adjust how this organization, the Rice Creek District, will carry out this program activities related to this process and to provide clarification. Again, this is no change to the intent or the language within your CIP or the dollar amounts identified in your watershed plan. This notice has been noticed on the district website, in the Pioneer Press, your official newspaper, as well as at the district office, and distributed to the entire district distribution mailing list, those individuals who have asked to be put on that. To date, no comments have been received. Staff is recommending to approve 19-02 resolution, adopting the clarification in order to make clear the sources of funding for both the minor maintenance and trunk maintenance programs.
Okay, comments?
Madam
motion, yeah.
President, I'll move the resolution 2019-02. Therefore, be it resolved that after considering the facts herein, the Board of Managers adopts Plan Clarification Addendum Number 2 attached here to, and directs its staff to distribute the plan clarification to its distribution list of agencies and individuals who have received a copy of the plan, and post the clarification on the district's website within 30 days of adoption of this resolution.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
I just want to make sure that it's noted, as already stated by Administrator Belfiore, that this is not a change in policy. This is a restatement of what has been, my understanding, the policy the whole time I've been on this board, so I support it.
And Madam President, and to supplement Manager Bradley, this has been a policy of this board since 1992 in the Maya plan. So it's how the language seems to have been obscured a little bit. I don't know, because it has been used in the past and extensively.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Waller?
Yes.
Hockey absent. Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
Reiner, yes. Motion passes. Right.
I think it's up to me.
Yeah, go for it.
Madam President, I move to approve the check register dated January 9th, 2019, in the amount of $58,712.39, prepared by Redpath and Company.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, items of discussion. We had Chris on, although we did have a longer open forum than we planned. Did you want to address Samantha before, so she
I
can go?
did.
do that
Samantha,
first. Samantha?
we've
Samantha?
we all received notification that you've made a life change. I want to let you know how much I've appreciated your help and that you will in fact be missed.
Thank you.
And, I hope when you get back, you'll check to see whether or not we have any vacancies.
Thank you. I wasn't prepared to say anything today. And I am going to be back here for the 23rd, so I might just save it for that. But I do appreciate the work that you guys have done here and all my time here. So,
I wish you all the
Yeah,
best.
have
I'm
fun.
Thank you.
jealous as can be.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of fun. So we're,
Well, you're retired, you can do it.
yeah.
No, you can't.
My biggest regret ever was in college. I was supposed to travel to England for exchange student, didn't get to go for a reason. And I've regretted that my whole life, so I don't blame you one bit
It's
for.
not too late.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Just, Madam
We'll see you again.
President, I'm concerned about safety, so
I agree.
I have done some traveling. My first experience was with the government program in Southeast Asia and the Pacific.
Government program.
And so I would caution you about going to exotic places in authoritarianistic governments. People are often surprised to find out. Just this morning in the news, there's some young former Navy veteran who found himself infatuated with a young lady and now is in jail in Iran when he decided to visit there. So my only recommendation is, so that we do see you come back sometime here to the state, is that you be very careful. As a person who's done some traveling,
Yes.
I've been to a couple of revolutions and presidential elections. And they can be for me, being individual with an interest in government, they're kind of exciting, but I recommend that you not do that.
We will be
To
cautious.
be safe.
Thank you.
Well, now you've been told.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Sam. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Do we want to go ahead with the presentation, or what's everybody's schedules? I know we had a short one, but now, Chris, how long will you?
What are we talking about?
I can make the presentation as short as you'd like it.
Okay, give you 15 minutes. Good enough?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right. As long as you're all ready, it's good to go. We didn't know we were gonna have all open forum time. We just have-
Madam President, Board of Managers, so this is the presentation that I gave in conjunction with one of the managers, Corey Hankey from the Buffalo Creek Watershed District. And the main focus of this was a very similar kind of narrative as to the presentation Phil and I gave subsequent to that at MOD regarding working with municipalities and doing basic water management type projects. And so you might find a lot of parallels, but there are a few differences in what we did there that you might find interesting. They've actually gone a little further in the process of a basic water management project than Rice Creek has with one of the projects that we're working on right now in the with New Brighton, St. Anthony, and Roseville. So it might be of interest to you as to some of the challenges that Buffalo Creek has faced in this process, and some of the unique things that they have as a more rural type entity that also has to deal with municipal concerns. So just a little background, Buffalo Creek, generally located in Glencoe and portions there east into Renville County. It includes Renville, McLeod, and Sibley counties. They're actually were formed back in 1969. They're about double the size of Rice Creek in square miles. They have about the same number of entities that they deal with on the municipal level. They have 6 cities but 28 townships. So it's a little bit larger of a township, but they again are a little bit larger of a watershed district. But they again have some of these similar issues, even though they're in a rural area. They administer stormwater and drainage rules. Those rules are less complex as they're, again, out in the rural areas. They do administer are the drainage authority for a few drainage systems, though certainly not as many as Rice Creek. So some of their priorities for a long time since they were initially instituted were the efficiency and stability of Buffalo Creek. Buffalo Creek itself has a number of impairments, but even more importantly for them over the years, particularly in beginning with their establishment, is trying to prevent flooding along Buffalo Creek and to prevent the instability of the channel, which caused lots of deadfalls to occur. They're clearing trees out of the creek over and over again each year, and dealing with some of the meandering that has occurred that has caused lots of erosion in different locations. One of the big things more recently is preserving or minimizing this downstream impact from some of the drainage and stormwater decisions. Again, part of this is something that they can do within their permitting process, but part of it is related to issues that may not be solved just through the permitting process alone. And that's where you again getting back to that, what we talk about, the three-legged stool that Rice Creek thinks of, the permitting, the programs and projects. Well, Buffalo Creek is the same way. They have different programs that they utilize, and then what we're talking about now is a project that they've been working with municipalities to try to solve some of these issues. And I won't get into a lot about what their activities that they currently are doing, other than the one that would be the main topic of this is this collaboration with the city of Glencoe. So for years, the city and the Buffalo Creek Watershed District really have been butting heads a lot. It's been something that has occurred throughout the years, and the manager, Corey Hinkie, he was able to elaborate on this a little further in the previous presentation we gave, but it was really of interest to them to try to resolve that, because the issues kept getting greater, the flooding that has been occurring around the city, and the solutions weren't occurring. And it all kind of came to a head when the city applied for a permit to provide a new outlet to the city, and the project would not meet the district rules, and so the district was forced to deny the permit. And after that, everybody kind of said, time out, let's see if we can regroup and find a way around this so that we're not slamming our heads against the wall. And so really it became a partnership then. And this project has changed the tenor of how the district and the city work with each other. And it's been quite a breath of fresh air for everybody that's been involved. So again, one of the big issues is flooding in this district. And back in 2012, they received what would be the equivalent of a 500-year rainfall event. I think it was on the order of, 9 or 10 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period, and it flooded out major parts of the city. And it occurred again in 2014. You can see all the flooded area that's adjacent to the city, and it affects agricultural areas and affected numerous city facilities. They had to pump water to get water away from one of their roadways, and put a lot of cost involved. In addition to this flooding, they had all sorts of infrastructure issues. One case, there was a storm sewer system that was owned by the city that was repeatedly failing, getting clogged up, and causing problems. In addition to this, they had access issues related to some of the drainage systems adjacent to the city. There's actually two major drainage systems, one on either side of the city, that are partially within the city and partially outside of the city, that are not public drainage systems. They were organized privately at one point, and since then they've gone into disrepair, and they have no formal organization to them to be able to complete any sort of repairs. And so the city had no ability to have a reliable outlet from the city. The problem kept getting worse year after year, and there's no ability to do maintenance along there because of that lack of access. And then one of the other major items, of course, is the stability of Buffalo Creek. Flooding along Buffalo Creek and being conscious of the potential for having additional outflows from the city into Buffalo Creek that may potentially result in damage, either on a project level scale or cumulatively associated with other projects. And that again gets back to the concerns the district had in denying that original permit. So again, that initial solution that the city had, let's put in a bigger pipe. That literally was what the solution was, and it had a lot of costs associated with it, and it just pushed the problem downstream, and that was again why the district denied this solution. Where do we go from here? Well, we start looking at a potential basic water management project. And, Buffalo Creek, they were uniquely situated to be able to provide this help with this solution because they're the only entity that had the ability to provide this multi-jurisdictional solution that was afforded to them through statute 103D. So they collaborate with the city to help them describe a petition back to Buffalo Creek that it served a couple purposes. One is that going through the 103D process enabled additional funding sources to be at least have the opportunity to be provided. And then it also created a buy-in from the city, noting that this is, part of their problem. They were going to help be part of the solution. It wasn't, here, Buffalo Creek, you need to solve this for us, So getting that petition really was one critical component of that. And then another thing was finding a multi-purpose solution because there's a lot of issues that are related there. Not only flood control in and out of the city, but their municipal stormwater management. They're having problems with their own infrastructure having an outlet for that. With the water quality issues that are associated with having some of these flows coming out of the city that have never been treated. And then, of course, drainage itself, because that was the purpose of these original ditches that were dug adjacent to the city. So we needed to have a solution that at least addressed all of these issues. Might not solve any one of them totally, but at least addresses them and provides some sort of benefit to multiple parties. So there's a couple examples. They've actually already completed one basic water management project, and they're in the midst of a second one that's located on the east side of the city. This graphic here shows these ditches that I was referring to. There's actually 3 different ditch systems. One is on the west side where we have recently completed projects. And then there's one more that comes from the north into the city that sends increasing flows into the city, and that currently is being handled by city storm sewer, which has resulted in a lot of street flooding within the city. And then there's also an east ditch, and this is where the city originally was hoping, well, let's take all the problems that we're getting from that central corridor, push it over to the east ditch, and you can imagine that the people along that east ditch weren't overly happy, in addition to those concerns about Buffalo Creek. So again, these projects we worked on, the one that's on the west side is referred to as the Marsh Water Project, and that's the one I'll talk about most closely here. So initially, to get started, they had to be very deliberate in this process, and they went through the petition, which included 4 phases, and this is very similar to the petition that was presented to you by St. Anthony, New Brighton, and Roseville. Those same exact 4 steps where you go through and determine what the problems are. You try to determine what potential solutions are for these problems, look at what the funding and financing and timeframes might be as a 3rd step, and then the 4th step being an implementation step. And it's important as part of this to be, again, very deliberate in going through each one of these steps, not one by one, and not getting ahead of yourselves. And having lots of meetings, and they held numerous meetings with city staff to be able to get buy-in from them on what potential solutions might be, having public information meetings and public hearings, and of course, that's all very familiar to Rice Creek. There's a very broad stakeholder engagement that was required as part of these projects, and that again helped get that local buy-in, not only from the city, getting the township involved, road authorities. There were the county, McLeod County had a county highway there, and MnDOT had a state highway there that required coordination with them on how we were going to provide solutions there. They, of course, had Wetland Conservation Act concerns and issues in addition to Corps of Engineer issues related to Clean Water Act, and we ended up actually having to get a permit and do mitigation, even though we were actually creating a wetland creation area as part of our project. So that also probably sounds very familiar to you as well. And unfortunately, we had to get that mitigation, but going through those hoops, we at least were able to get a project completed. And then we even had private individuals involved in this project. Seneca Foods, the plant that we went through, is the largest sweet corn producing plant, I believe, in the world, certainly within the country. And so there were a lot of concerns that they had regarding this drainage system going through there. And we had to complete a lot of involvement with them, not only to help determine what some of the project solutions might be, including replacing some culverts within their plant area, but also getting easements from them and permission to spread soils on some of their properties. And that itself was took a fair amount of time to get that process in place, in addition to acquiring easements from other landowners. And that was one thing that we did learn from this, is that what might seem to be a simple process in getting easements, as it turned out, took a long time, a fair amount of time, and it was really the major component of our final design period prior to construction. And the earlier that one can get involved with that landowner engagement for acquiring easements, the better. And that was one learning
Chris,
lesson
on
we
this
had.
company, did it end up that you were trading things off, or did you pay them for easements, or how did, when we did Walmart over there, we kind of traded around and made things work. Did they do the same?
Yes, that is a very good point. We looked at what the easement purchase cost would be if we weren't doing any other component of the project with them. They also had water management district fees that they were going to be paying in, and so we helped use those to offset the cost of the project and find an agreement there. We also looked at potentially seeing if they wanted to have further enhancements on their property for water quality purposes to help them meet, ongoing pollution control agency requirements that they have as their stormwater permit that they have. And they weren't interested in that after we provided them the cost, of course. They were very interested to be ahead of that, but so yeah, and it actually ended up taking a change in the leadership at the plant in order to get this, because the first plant manager we dealt with, he had no interest and did not want to be part of it at all, and didn't even want us to step foot on the plant area. We weren't able to use cameras and that sort of thing.
So it was kind of a personnel issue then?
It was very much a personnel issue. And so that's, again, one of these things that sometimes these projects take years to develop. This one ended up taking, all told, I think 4 years from beginning to end to get where we're at, mostly because of those issues with trying to get access.
I think that's what we're talking about in Hugo, isn't it? The access issue.
And one of the other components that we had to be very deliberate about was trying to define what is success for the project. And of course, everybody has their own idea of what success is. Everybody has their own interest. And we made sure we were very clear in developing our reports for the project and developing project concepts that we first identified mandatory criteria. These are the criteria we could not live without on the project in order for it to be successful. And then also developing non-mandatory criteria, which were things that would be nice to have, but weren't necessarily mandatory for the overall project success. And doing so helped answer questions at the tail end from people when they said, well, why aren't you providing this in the project? Why aren't we spending this on the project? And then we can tell them, well, you can do that, but that only meets the non-mandatory design criteria. It doesn't help with the mandatory components, and and you have to make a decision then, is it worth spending that extra money in order to meet those non-mandatory components? And vice versa, you know, we had to let people know if they were trying to decrease the scope of that project by telling them, well, you aren't going to meet the mandatory requirements if you do so. And I think that was very important, and I think this is a concept that we've also worked at with some of the projects we've been working at related to the basic water management project. And then one of the other components that was very critical is making sure that allocation of cost was the last decision that you made and the last thing that was brought up and discussed with people, and trying to clearly draw a line between the process you use to identify solutions and who pays. Because that's, of course, what everybody likes to gravitate to right from the beginning. Well, I don't want to pay for this. And we had to keep reminding people from the beginning, well, we're not going to be talking about that allocation at this point. Let's figure out what the solutions are, then we can get to the point of who's going to pay. And then what we ended up doing then is coming up with a concept of identifying different project components that we could justify allocating regional cost to versus local cost. And again, very similar to the processes that you've seen in the work we do with Rice Creek. And so this process was very critical in order to be able to, again, get buy-in from people. And in the end, between being clear on how these project costs were derived and having those public information meetings and public hearings, we were able to go through this project process with very little concern over the payment of these costs. And of course, you're going to find a few people that might have concerns about their own property. Mostly those were related to, well, I don't think my water goes that way, you know. Which is, again, a thing that we've heard over and over again, you know, with our development of water management districts. But we really could get a lot of those concerns out of the way by being very clear and upfront with people. So what did success look like? We were able to get easements for access throughout the property, able to reduce flooding. This map here shows what the FEMA mapped floodplain was prior to the project versus what it was after the project. It shrunk quite considerably. It didn't solve all the problems, but it's definitely helped out considerably in some of the areas in the city. And the predictability of their stormwater management, that was one thing that they really had concerns about. People had no idea how things were going to react when they got these larger flows, and now we know what those flood elevations are going to be and they're not going to be changed by lack of maintenance. And then improving water quality. These are a couple of the ponds that were created. Again, they about a 7-acre stormwater wetland complex that was created that provided not only water quality treatment, but also that needed flood storage. And then finally, that collaboration, it really paid benefits for how the district was portrayed and how the city communicated with the Watershed district. And because of that, what resulted is, what's next? That was the question we heard over and over again from the city, from the people in the township, the people that are upstream of the areas that we worked in. They said, well, when am I going to get my work done on my property? So that's the, you know, the burden of success on the project, and definitely something to be expecting as you complete other projects in these areas, that they're going to ask, well, what's next for me? So, any other questions?
Madam President,
Oh, go ahead.
it's my understanding, Chris, you converted a private ditch into a public ditch. Didn't that by itself give you easement rights?
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers. What we did was we actually created the private system into a public project, a project of the district. So it becomes a 103D 605 project. And in order to be able to do that, the district had to actually physically acquire easements over that area to be able to maintain the project. similarly to what the district, has done previously and is in the process of doing with some of the district facilities.
One question on the easements, back to that again, because it's kind of coming like a freight train to us here. Do you have any suggestions after this project? Do you bring people all together at once and try to talk about it, or do you try to go home to home when we're looking at these ditches that we're gonna be coming up on?
So I think that it's important to make clear in your early stages with, a public information meeting that there is a need for easements, and identifying that the properties with which the likely easements will be needed, and asking people that are in the attendance to be able to provide any concerns that they might have initially on it. That would be, again, the first step. And then what we ended up doing as we finalized where these easement locations were, we essentially handed those to the attorneys to be able to work to try to acquire the easements. Now, one thing that we were able to do, because a couple of the managers were had a long history in the area and knew a couple of the parties involved, they were able to go directly to some of those parties and talk to them about the need for easements, and that itself helped considerably in the facilitation. Now, one thing to note is that Buffalo Creek is a bit unusual in that they don't have any staff, none at all. So their managers oftentimes provide the same duties as, some of your staff members would. And as a result of that, they oftentimes are out, taking a look at projects, being in communication with landowners about project-specific items, a little different relationship there. But, it definitely helped having somebody that had ties to the community to be able to talk to these
Talk to
folks.
somebody, yeah.
It really helped out a lot.
So, Madam President, so as I understand it, this was a 103D as in Delta, not an E as in Echo project, correct?
That is correct. We looked at initially whether or not it would make sense to try to approach people about interest in establishing a 103E drainage system. That in itself had its own complexities, as you need to have a certain population draining to the system, signing on to the petition. And you just couldn't accomplish that necessarily by the city itself, or and I don't believe at that time that the landowners in the township had the same kind of buy-in or urgency as the city did at that time. So, but that was something that was at least considered anyway. It was potentially going through a 103E process, but in the end, it made a lot more sense to go through 103D. And again, going through that statute, 103D 605, that opened up the ability for the Watershed District to actually establish a project tax levy that they had outside of the regular ad valorem fund in order to be able to generate additional revenue from the Watershed District.
So, Madam President, one of the significant differences between the Delta and the Echo chapter is the Echo chapter has easements already established for it, doesn't it?
When you create the project, yeah, it automatically.
If you're going to go in and repair an E-system, there's easements already exist there. It's just a matter of defining them again.
Correct, and if you were going to, on this particular project, do a new drainage system, you would have to pay damages, and the payment of damages would be the equivalent of purchasing of easements. You wouldn't necessarily have to get the actual easement in place, but by paying those damages, that's what creates the ability for access.
But here in Rice Creek, we already have the easements established, is what I'm getting at.
But there are areas, I understand it, in Ramsey in particular, where that may not be true.
If I may add on to three managers' comments about easements and land acquisition. So I think of a couple projects that are potentially coming down the pike very likely in the next couple of years that are going to be two of your very large projects that'll take a good chunk of your water plan 10-year time frame coming forward probably. One is the 2, 3, and 5 basic water management project. It's already been mentioned in the southwest part of the district. That's a basic water management project. As you know, those are also public drainage systems. So related to land access for both easements and maintenance, there will be a mixed bag of potentially depends on what comes forward with the projects and solutions that you wish to pursue related to that process, but we'll have 103E related approaches and processes for land acquisition or use, which has been mentioned, we go through a reasonable area for construction process with the public and with the landowners in that case. Currently what you're doing also in Hugo with that one that you're anticipating, and that's the other project is JD3. So that is a project that is more based, instead of a basic water management project, you'd have that mostly related to 103E. And so you'd be going through the construction process, reasonable area construction process, as we've done with other public drainage systems and involving the public. However, in both cases, the methodical and fairly intensive upfront discussions, no matter how you're using your authorities, what's the most important thing is how you are spending attention on the details of making sure we're making contacts, providing multiple opportunities for people to learn and become educated about what is going to happen on their property or close to their property, and giving them an opportunity to become get feedback and become active with us so that they fully understand that. That's what's going to make or break, just like Chris's project here. That's what's going to make or break both of them. We've had conversations, as you know, with councils of all 4 of those cities, Hugo and the 3 down in the southwest. And they're going to also be a very important participant in that because they're the local land use authority. Like it or not, they probably will get the first phone call, not us, even though the public doesn't know that it's Rice Creek versus the city. It's going to just think that the government is doing a project, and so we need to really work hard on making sure we're working strongly with the cities up front with them as well. So that's something that, as you know, I mean, we're learning how much energy that takes, and that's something that's very important to make sure that the back end of the project works.
Okay. Anything else? Questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Engineer update. Anybody have any other questions for Chris on any of our projects or schedules? Manager update. Manager Waller.
Well, I attended the, as with Manager Bradley and President Reiner, the TAC meeting, or Technical Advisory Committee meeting with our partners in the cities on the upcoming development of our water management plan. And I tell you that we had, I thought, a very good turnout, very excellent questions. I hope that the staff will type up as they volunteered. I'm going to accept their volunteering. Type up those 30 or 40 items and identify which different organizations were supporting them underneath on the wall. That would be very good. And I want to compliment the staff on the process that's gone through here and ask them to do some more work. I have been involved in personally involved in the development of 3 watershed management generations here. This is the second one here with you, President Reiner, we've developed. And I was involved with one in the advisory committee around the year 2000 or so. And this process has been the most comprehensive and in asking for the involvement of the stakeholders in here. It's really been very, very good. And so I'd ask the staff to keep a diary of the activities that you've been doing, so we have a record. You know, how many times you put out, for example, that you put out the website that nobody's answered to yet, but nevertheless made mention at the meetings, the whole process, how we develop the water management plan. Because I think it ought to be an addendum in the new water management plan, so that 10 years from now, people can see what we were doing, and so that the protocols and processes for involving the entire community are not lost. You know, and this is the most extensive involvement of the communities and partners. I mean, we had 27 people at one time, I heard, or organizations represented the other day. And so I think that's quite a compliment to the staff, the way they planned this, and I asked them to keep a diary of it, you know, all the way through, including the Citizens Advisory Committee's involvement on it, and when you had, and a timeline of what the dates were, so that we can have this process monumented and part of the plan to show how it was done.
And I think an added benefit to that will be when we present this to Bowser, for example, we can present this along with it and attached is the process we followed. I think that would be impressive.
Yeah, and I think that'd be important too.
I
To
agree
see how we did.
with both of you about that. In my experience, the ones that need the most education are not the local folks, but rather the regulatory state aid groups. They seem to be the ones that need the education, and in my experience with them.
Update, Manager Bradley.
Nothing to update, but question, I'm gonna be at the CIC meeting tonight, and I saw that they have a meeting scheduled later this month. Do we need coverage, or is coverage from this board established for that meeting?
That is completely your discretion. I know that is an extra meeting. I know in the other extra meeting you added in December, you decided not to have coverage, as I recall, or did somebody
No, I
show up?
went to that
You
one.
went,
I went to
okay,
that
sorry.
one.
Yeah.
That was an extra meeting. This is another extra meeting. This is twofold. First fold to look through the urban stormwater Bowser watershed-based applications, as I mentioned earlier. And then secondly, I believe I will be there to give them highlights of the 2019 budget.
What day is that on there?
23rd, same day as your board meeting in the night at 5:30.
At 5:30.
Since I'm about to go on vacation, then I probably owe you something.
Yeah, I think you do. At least one more meeting,
Yeah, let me quickly check here.
if you can. Otherwise, I think I can
I'm
do
just
it.
gonna quickly check my calendar here.
Feeling
Yeah,
guilty, huh?
I'm here, I will volunteer
Oh, okay, thank
to
you.
handle the 23rd also.
Yeah, I just think it's a good idea to have a board member there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was only interested in listening to the plan, so,
So you don't want to go?
well,
Well, it's not an issue of wanting to go, it's just.
Yeah, I
think
understand.
it's-
I'm
it's
just
a good
kidding.
idea.
yeah, I don't think the plan's up for discussion at that meeting, is it?
No.
So,
Okay.
Steve, anything new?
Nothing
Was it-
critical.
Board President, and so the other item, and we've talked about both of these already, but you have a double header, if you will, on Monday, the 28th of January. You have a double header meeting. Those have both been noticed now, the 1 o'clock planning workshop, and then the 6:30 public information meeting for JD3 at the City of Hugo. So double header.
Madam President, yesterday, Administrator Bear informed me that the City of Hugo Council has also scheduled a meeting at the same time. They want to be joint with us, so, in the Hugo Chambers. So just to give you a heads up, that the City Council will be there also.
Okay, then
So,
just coordinate with staff. on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have more shoulders to bear the burdens.
The only thing I have is that the City of Columbus is putting in 3 new members tonight on their council, and that at some point in the next month or two, they would like an update from the watershed as to the structure and how it works and what we've done, and so that the new council members can get up to date on it, so. Nothing specific, but they're gonna need some information. So when they get yelled at, they can refer it to the watershed.
Right, like everybody else.
Anything else? Need a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.